We are going to be talking about what is coming in 2023, prophetic, well, listen, possible, I guess I should say, prophetic fulfillments, because things are right on the edge, and I'm going to have our guest today connect everything for us. So please welcome Bill Salus. Bill, we made it this far. And when I say this far, the last few minutes, but we're here. It's great to see you. And I want to ask you this. Well, first of all, say hi to everybody.
Hello, everybody, and I'm glad we made it. We made it through 2022, Tom, and that was no easy undertaking.
No, it wasn't. And then we are going into 2023, and we were talking earlier today, and I said, man, the people really need to hear this. And I know this is just one of those, these messages that people are going to want to share with all their friends. And so, Bill, let's start talking about 2023, just some of the things that you see and where this is going and how close we are to the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, the rapture, the tribulation period. I mean, when I was talking with you earlier today, it was just like, wow, we better be ready. So take it away, Bill.
Okay, great. And I'd like to caveat, first of all, you know, we're going to talk about things that I think are stage setting, and we're going to shift our focus. The spotlight is going to go toward the Middle East in light of the recent Israeli elections with the far right-wing government. I think that's very telling, and I want to spend some time on that. But I will caveat and say Edgar Fiedler, the renowned American economist, was wise when he said, "He who lives by the crystal ball soon learns to eat shattered glass." So we're not saying what we're going to talk about is going to happen for sure, but it's highly possible that the things we're going to talk about today could happen. I mean, there could be the prophetic fulfillment of maybe one or more prophecies. You know, in May of this year, Israel will celebrate its 75th birthday. That was the last literal fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And I know, yes, the stage is being set. There's conversions of all the different end time signs. The pandemic led the way for the global resetters to start to move into motion. The digital currencies and the blockchain technologies are coming at us like a freight train. Russia's on the move. You know, we know they're involved in Gog and Magog prophecy. China, of course, threatening Taiwan. Those things are all converging. Stage setting, I think that's going to continue to happen at an accelerated pace. But I think the real thing I'm looking at right now is turning my attention to the Middle East. You know, we're told in Daniel 2, verses 20 and 21, "Blessed be the name of God forever and forever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changes the times and seasons, and he removes kings and raises up kings, and he gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." And Tom, what we've been seeing is the Lord has been changing times and seasons. He has been removing and now raising up kings. And when it comes to that type of a topic, there's no more important kings than the kings of Israel. We look at this new leadership coming into Israel. They've had 5 elections over the last 4 years, and now we've got Benjamin Netanyahu back, and he's putting together a far right-wing cabinet that I think is going to shake things up. I think they're going to, the national security minister is now in place, named Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's going to shake up the status quo on the Temple Mount. You watch that's going to happen, I think, in this year, and that's going to freak the Arabs out. And then you're going to see Smotrich, Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister. He's the de facto prime minister of the West Bank. He's going to start trying to annex more territory in the West Bank, the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria. And I think all these things here are going to lead toward Jerusalem becoming a cup of trembling and the Arab-Israeli conflicts that are abounding in biblical prophecy.
Let's take 2023. We watch what's happening with the government over in Israel. You and I have talked about Isaiah chapter 28 in the past with the leaders of Jerusalem. The Bible says there, when the scornful leaders are in Jerusalem, they basically make a deal with the devil, with Sheol and the grave. So they make this deal to avoid a scourge that's coming to them. And then God says in Isaiah chapter 28 that he will annul that covenant, thinking they're going to enter some kind of an agreement to get along with their neighbors. We know that from Daniel chapter 9. But we look at the government that's forming. It is all over the news if people are looking to the Mideast. And it is amazing to watch. And that's a little bit of what you were telling me earlier today. So fill us in a little bit on what you see happening there and what do you see coming for 2023 with Israel?
Well, I think we have to turn our attention to the elephant in the room, and that is Iran's nuclear program. They've already gotten to a point of enriching uranium to 60% purity, and the next step could be just weeks away to get to 90% purity and a nuclear weapon. I'm very concerned that if it's not already got one, they're in the process of getting one very soon, and developing the ability to launch, put that into ballistic missiles that can get to Israel in 8 minutes. And I'm concerned that is where this is going. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu is at a red line when they got to that. Remember, the United Nations, he had his little chart, his third grade chart, little red line, and they get to the certain level of purity. That's their red line. And so I think Benjamin Netanyahu is going to consider, perhaps even this year, having to attack Iran's nuclear program, nuclear sites. Matter of fact, a video came out just recently from Iran's ministry saying, if you attack our nuclear sites, this is what we'll do. It's a video that you can check out on YouTube by Memory, MEMRI. And they show all the underground missile silos they've got over there by the Elam territory, which would be the west coast of Iran that hugs the Persian Gulf. They talk about how these missiles are going to take out Tel Aviv. If Israel comes and attacks Iran, will they be able to get back and land at the Ben Gurion airport, and will the Dimona nuclear reactor be hit? So this rhetoric is ratcheted up beyond rumors of war, in my estimation. So I think what's going to happen, quite possibly, is Israel's going to launch out and attack Iran. And when that happens, it could fulfill a prophecy in Jeremiah 49, verses 34 through 39, dealing with ancient territory of Elam. And when that happens, I think Iran will ultimately bring forward their proxies in Syria with Bashar al-Assad, in Lebanon with Hezbollah, Hamas of the Gaza, Shia militias in Iraq, the Houthis down in Yemen. I think it'll become a major conflict with all kinds of prophetic implications, Tom.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because I get a lot of people that watch this program, and they'll ask me in the Q&A, and I'm pretty sure it's going to come up again even today, with Psalm 83. In fact, I was just asked the other day, Psalm 83, what is my take on Psalm 83? And I've said before, we've done videos. We actually have a documentary about some of these things too, and you've done a lot. And I said, well, Bill Salus is going to be on the program coming up on Monday, and I'll ask him about that. And I said, I'm not totally sold out that Psalm 83 is the future event the way that Bill lays it out, but I see ultimately Israel will have their fulfillment of all of the land that God has given them. Ultimately, I know it'll be done by the millennial kingdom, but I said, to be fair, Bill lays out a good, he has some good thoughts behind it. In fact, some of the commentators said, you've really thought through it and explained things really well. So I want to give you the opportunity to explain that a little bit more, because I believe, I look at it and go, you may be spot on this. When you're talking about Israel and Iran, Jeremiah chapter 49, Isaiah chapter 17 with the end of Damascus, and all of these different things fitting into Psalm 83. And some of our viewers, they don't know anything about your thoughts on Jeremiah chapter 49, for example. You have a book on these things. So a little bit more of that, if you could lay out a little bit more why you believe, this is, when you look at it, and I want to say this also, is many commentators who have not received what you say about all these things, from Jeremiah 49 to Isaiah 17, which I look at Isaiah 17 as still being future, the destruction of Damascus, and Psalm 83, I've had many of our colleagues have pointed out that they find it strange, without agreeing with you, they find it strange that Ezekiel 38 doesn't include any of those people groups that you mentioned that are immediately surrounding Israel. And you've said, well, the reason why is because you have them all included in Psalm 83. So I find it fascinating. You have the greater Ezekiel 38 and the smaller Psalm 83, and other people puzzled, well, why aren't they there? So, that's an interesting point just by omission on from some of our colleagues.
Correct. And is the omission from Ezekiel chapter 38 intentional? And I think it is, because you have an outer ring of countries involved in Ezekiel 38: Russia, Turkey, Iran, some of the North African countries, Sudan, Morocco, Tunisia, Ethiopia, some of the breakaway southern republics of the Soviet Union. A formidable offense, but none of them share common borders with Israel. None of them have been Israel's notorious enemies. The ones who have been Israel's notorious enemies actually form an inner ring of countries that share common borders with Israel. And back in the day when we talked about their ancestral lands, there would be the Edomites, Moab, Moabites, Ammonites, gigabytes, megabytes, and I often joke around with that. Tyre, Philistia for the Gaza, Egypt, of course, Dedan, Saudi Arabia, the Ishmaelites. Now they show up in Psalm 83, and they are Israel's notorious enemies from time immemorial. They are Israel's enemies. All those countries that surround Israel voted against their being in Israel in 1947. They went to war with Israel in 1948, and they're all listed in Psalm 83, which is a prophecy that talks about those very populations, saying that they're going to come together at a point in time. They're going to form a crafty counsel, a devious plan to come against Israel and wipe the nation of Israel off, that the name of Israel will be remembered no more. And they attempted to do that in 1948. And some people think, well, that was the actual fulfillment of that biblical prophecy. But the reality is, if you read those are verses 1 through 8. If you read verses 9 through 18, you realize the other things that have to happen to completely fulfill that prophecy have not happened as of yet. And it talks about Asaph, who wrote that psalm, who is a prophet, according to 2 Chronicles 29:30. He talks about when this happens, that he petitions the Lord to say, deal with them like Gideon dealt with the Midianites. Deal with them like at the time of the prophetess Deborah, what they did with the Canaanites. And when in essence, what he was petitioning the Lord to do was empower the Israeli Defense Forces, which Gideon was the Israeli Defense Forces at that time, empower them, go through them. Gideon with his 300-man army took out 120,000 Midianites, and the Midianites who had oppressed the Jews for 7 years never oppressed them again. Then he said, and these are back in the book of Judges, chapters 4 through 8. Then he says to Deborah, prophetess Deborah, time of the Canaanites who had oppressed the Jews for 20 years, Deborah grabs her General Barak, and they go and they destroy the Canaanites, the king, the General Sisera, King Jabin, and the Canaanites never oppressed them again. And he goes on talking more graphically, make them like a whirling dust, chaff before the wind, make them be perish and confound. And now that did not happen. Matter of fact, these countries are still coming against Israel presently, although Jordan and Egypt have fragile peace treaties. We point out in our DVD, Tom, the Pre-Tribulation Prophecies, a prophetic documentary, that Jordan has several prophecies where there's no peace treaty, and the Israeli Defense Forces are actually waging war against Jordan and annexing territory in the aftermath of a victory. So there's all kinds of prophecies and featuring the Israeli Defense Forces who are not involved in Ezekiel 38. And if we have time, we can go through some of those, because I think those are the ones I'm watching for in 2023. They're not in Ezekiel 38, the Israeli Defense Forces, and they're not fighting in the tribulation period. So therefore, these unfulfilled prophecies, to me, are pre-tribulational, which we point out in our DVD.
We have a lot of other things we want to get to today, so I'm probably going to have you back sometime in January, because I want to get into the millennial kingdom and beyond, for people to understand what is coming, because there's great news coming too. I also see cases projecting into 2023. We think, okay, we can look at Russia and Ukraine. We look at China is saber rattling. We look at the situation with Taiwan. We're looking at a continued collapse of America, I believe. What's your take when you look at wars and rumors of wars and things escalating into 2023 in that regard?
Right. I think the wars and rumors of wars are going to become a reality. I think there will be. Again, we're living by the crystal ball here. We don't want to be chewing on shattered glass. But the point is, here's the scenario I'm watching. This is the scenario we put forward in our DVD. I think Israel and Iran are going to go head to toe and fight. I think Iran is going to be hit by Israel. Israel really has no choice. I'm not even sure America will support that process very much with the Biden administration. Some people don't think they will. But I think what will happen is that when that happens, Iran will fight back. and they'll fight back ferociously. They're prepared for this. They'll shut down the Strait of Hormuz. That'll block off about a quarter of the world's oil coming through, which will stymie the world economies. Wow. They'll call on Syria, Bashar al-Assad, to come with chemical weapons. They used chemical weapons over 300 times in their revolution, Syrian revolution. They'll call on Hezbollah to launch about 2,000 missiles a day. They've got about 150,000 missiles. Some of them are precision guided, can hit with pinpoint accuracy. They'll call on Hamas to match about 1,000 missiles a day. Some of them are much more intense than the Katyushas of old. They'll call on the Houthis, who also say we have precision guided missiles that can hit Tel Aviv. So Israel is going to find itself in a prison rules war, and they will not be able to stop all those missiles coming in. And I think what they're going to do is lash out and take out a major Arab city, and that would be the destruction of Damascus in fulfillment of Isaiah 17 and Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 23 and 27. Now, we just recently, as we speak, there's news going out that Israel struck the Damascus airport and put it out of business, they say, for probably 24 to 48 hours. In June of 2022, they struck Damascus airport and put it out of commission for like a couple weeks. They struck Aleppo airport in northern Syria not too long ago also. Israel is at war with Syria already. Now, imagine if Syria was striking the Ben Gurion airport. Do you think Israel would stand by idly and do nothing? But for some reason, Syria, who does not have a peace treaty with Israel, has decided not to move forward against Israel. Probably, one, they know they'd get a shellacking, and two, they're waiting for Iran to give them the green light with all their forces to come together. And I think when that happens, this is the scenario I put out. It's scripturally supported. I could be wrong. I could have the sequence of events out of order. But Israel strikes Iran. That fulfills Jeremiah chapter 49, the Elam prophecy. Israel takes out Damascus. That fulfills Isaiah 17. And I think what happens is, it says in Isaiah 17, verses 4 through 6, that during that Isaiah battle, it says, in that day, the glory of Jacob will fade, his flesh will wax lean, he'll be like an olive tree with a few olives up in the uppermost branches, etc. I'm paraphrasing. The point being, I think Israel takes a hit, Tom. I think what happens is Israel finds itself in a war where they have casualties, they can't stop all the missiles coming in. That's why they take out Damascus, and when they take out Damascus, probably a nuclear strike, they could take out a city overnight. Tactically burst altitude just high enough so it doesn't come down and suck up all the particles of the earth underneath it to contaminate Israel. I think what happens is the Arab world goes, whoa, Israel just took out an Arab city, the most continuously inhabited, oldest continuously inhabited city in recorded history, and they're hurt right now. Are they going to come out and take Beirut? Are they going to take out Amman, Jordan? Are they going to take out Mecca? Are they going to take out Cairo? And then they do actually take out Amman, Jordan, and that's in Jeremiah chapter 49. It says in Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 2, there's an alarm of war in Rabbah of the Ammonites. That's Amman, Jordan, the capital. Israel, it'll be a desolate mound. Sounds like Damascus, as Damascus will be a ruinous heap in Isaiah 17:1. It'll cease to be a city. Amman, Jordan will be a desolate mound. It says Israel will take possession of its inheritance. So I think what happens then is Psalm 83 happens. The Arabs go, let's confederate. We couldn't take them out in 1948. We got to take them out now. They're hurt. The Jordan Treaty goes by the wayside, which you might see that go by the wayside even in 2023, by the way, because Ben-Gvir is going to go, he's going to threaten the status quo of the Temple Mount. You watch. As a matter of fact, he wants to meet there tomorrow. Yeah. He's going to go up there supposedly. And you know, Tom, the status quo of the Temple Mount is going to change because the Jews are going to build their temple there, the Tribulation Temple.
Let me ask you about that, because a lot of people aren't familiar with Ben-Gvir and what's really going on in Israel. And he is right, politically, right, very conservative. He is pushing toward Israel being able to have a temple. So we're watching some very interesting dynamics take place. Can you explain a little bit more about this with Ben-Gvir? And there's a lot of pushback too. I was reading probably an hour before we came live, the threats against Netanyahu now, if he even allows this to happen tomorrow on the Temple Mount. Hamas is saying, oh, there's going to be a heavy price. I think their word was there's going to be explosions if he goes to the Temple Mount. Can you fill in our viewers a little bit on this?
Oh, yeah, the Palestinian Authority and the Hamas have basically said in advance, knowing that Ben-Gvir was going to become the national security minister, that is a actual declaration of war as far as they're concerned. On the Temple Mount right now, the Jordan, through the WAQF Antiquities Society, has control over the Temple Mount. Israel made a blunder in 1967, and they gave control over the Temple Mount to Jordan. And so basically, the Arabs can go there freely, but the Jews can't. The Jews can't even technically pray there. I mean, they're not supposed to. I mean, I think there's a law that they could, but they don't enforce it. So what we found over the past few years is that the Jews would go there and they drop coins down by the temple, the Dome of the Rock there, where the foundation stone is underneath there. And they'd bend down to pick them up in homage to pray, and acting like they're picking up a coin and disguising a prayer. They would get on their fake phone calls on their cell phone and pray to Jehovah, because they were not allowed to pray. Now, Ben Gvir is wanting to change that. He's going to want to make it a religious site for the Jews on an equal basis. Now, that is going to be a problem. And it says in Zechariah 12, verse 2, there's going to come a time where Jerusalem will become a cup of trembling when they, talking about all the nations round about, who happen to be in the inner circle of Psalm 83, try to lay siege on Judah and on Jerusalem. And so now you got Ben Gvir. He's going to change the status quo of the Temple Mount. They're going to be concerned about that. They're going to try to lay siege on Jerusalem. And then you got Smotrich, who's in like I said, the de facto prime minister of the West Bank, the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria. He's going to go over there and start making waves. He's going to start trying to annex more territory in there. That's the Judea area. So they're going to lay siege, in my estimation, on Jerusalem and Judea. And Jerusalem will become a cup of trembling. And what happens is God says, in fact, let me pop this up real quick on my computer. When that happens, when Jerusalem becomes a cup of trembling, it says that in Zechariah 12, verse 6, the response will be, in that day, when Judah becomes a cup of trembling, I'll make the governors of Judah, that is the Israeli Defense Forces, like a fire pan in the woodpile, and a fiery torch in the sheaves, and they shall devour all the surrounding peoples, not the world at large, all the surrounding peoples, not Ezekiel 38 outer ring, and on the right hand and on the left hand, but Jerusalem shall be inhabited again in her own place. It's the Israeli Defense Forces. They're going to go to war. They're going to be like a fiery torch, and they're going to take out, like kindling, the sheaves of those Arabs around them. And God is going to support that, and that's the prophecy in Zechariah chapter 12.
So you believe that prophecy is actually coming up soon? It's not something that's happening at the end of the tribulation or something like that?
No, because we do a good job on the DVD, the Pre-Tribulation Prophecies DVD, to point out that the Israeli Defense Forces, in fulfillment of numerous prophecies, Obadiah 1:18, Ezekiel 25:14, I can rifle off a ton of them. We do on the DVD, we put slides and PowerPoints and stuff like that. We find out if you understand the tribulation period, and we just talked about they're not involved in Ezekiel 38 because God stops Ezekiel 38 supernaturally with the great earthquake, fire, hailstone, brimstone, flooding rains, that sort of thing. So it's not involving the Israeli Defense Forces nor the American troops. So what happens is with the tribulation period, in the first half of the tribulation, Israel's living in a at peace. They've had a covenant confirmed by the Antichrist. They're not fighting the Arabs. They're living in peace. It's a pseudo peace because it's going to get broken at the midpoint of the tribulation. It's a false peace. And in the second half, even Jesus said in Matthew 24, verses 15, flee to the mountains, because what's going to happen, he knew, and at the midpoint of the tribulation, when the Antichrist goes into the abomination of desolation in the Jewish temple, that he's going to come out of that temple, he's going to try to commit genocide of the Jews. And Zechariah 13:8 says, 2/3 of the Jews in the land will be cut off. Zechariah 13:9 says, fortunately, but 1/3 will come through the fire. They become the faithful remnant of Israel. So they're not going to be fighting in Ezekiel 38, which I believe is just before the tribulation. That's my personal opinion for various reasons. And they're not going to be fighting in the tribulation, and they're not going to be fighting in the millennial kingdom. So what the Israeli Defense Forces, and I've got about 100 and some verses related to Psalm 83 showing the Israeli Defense Forces and related prophecies. They're going to be fighting in the pre-tribulation scenario. And I think that pre-tribulation scenario is going to be provoked perhaps even in 2023.
So what you also see, so everybody understands your thoughts, and I'm in agreement with this, the rapture taking place first, Ezekiel 38 coming after that, and I believe there's a gap after the rapture, because before the tribulation begins, and there's so many people that don't understand the tribulation does not begin until the confirmation of the covenant of Daniel chapter 9. So the rapture takes place, and this is what we did the DVD on, is what's going to happen during this time after the rapture and before the tribulation begins. So Ezekiel 38 after that. And so, there's a lot of people out there that think Ezekiel 38 is going to happen tomorrow. Keep reminding people it's not, because Israel's not dwelling in that place of peace and safety right now. They're totally on the edge. They're definitely not, they're on the edge regarding Russia, let alone, there has to be we're not at that place yet where Israel's guard is down. So what you're painting is a scenario that fits that from Psalm 83, Jeremiah chapter 49, all of this, where Israel will be dwelling in their land of peace and safety after those events take place, correct?
I am. I agree with you on the timing. I think Ezekiel 38 is after Psalm 83, but before the tribulation. I think there's a gap after the rapture. I don't know if the rapture is going to happen before, during, or after Psalm 83, or before, during, or after Psalm 83. But I believe all three of those events, the rapture, Psalm 83, and Ezekiel 38, happen before the tribulation period. And after the rapture, because it's not the rapture that starts the tribulation period, it's the confirmation of the false covenant in Daniel 9, verses 27, and Isaiah 28, verses 15 through 18. That's what starts the tribulation time clock ticking. Now, there's a gap, and some people like Gary Stearman, yourself, me, we believe in this gap. Mark Hitchcock and many others believe there's a gap. Some people suspect it could be a short period of time, a few days. I think it could even be maybe a couple of years, as does Gary Stearman and a few other people. The point being, if it's any prolonged period of time at all, Tom, after the supernatural event of the rapture, something's powerful is going to be happening, because at that point, Satan is no longer going to be restrained to unleash supernatural signs and lying wonders with all deception. And so things, in my estimation, God would have given us some information in the Bible for the people who get left behind, who are paying attention, who ultimately get saved, because many people do get saved after the rapture, the fifth seal saints and their brethren and their fellow servants, the tribulation saints, etc. They're going to be wanting to know what's going on, and God will not leave them without information. So I tend to float this idea. It gets me in all kinds of trouble. I thank you for kind of coming on board with it, that the seal judgments, which have traditionally been taught, they all fit in the start of the tribulation. They think that the Antichrist is the white horseman in the first seal, which I believe he is. And they say, well, that's got to be where the tribulation period starts. But it doesn't tell us that's where it starts. There's nothing in there that talks about the confirmation of the false covenant. Matter of fact, the only word that could have been used in the Greek is diatheke for a covenant. It doesn't even show up there. I don't think it starts right there for various reasons we put out on our DVD. And I think you can go through the first, second, third, and fourth, and fifth seal, and they may not even fit in the tribulation. They may fit in that gap. Now, that's an alternative view, and we get in all kinds of trouble when you bring it up. But the fifth seal saints, Tom, this caught your attention. They're asking a poignant question. How long, O Lord, until you avenge our blood on those who perpetrated their death? Yeah. And then they don't know that they're in the tribulation. I mean, they would not have known. They're dying for their faith. They're living in a time of increased prophetic awareness. The rapture's probably happened. They've seen the Psalm 83, Ezekiel 38, and they don't know that the confirmation of the false covenant's already happened. I have trouble with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have trouble with it too. The only thing I think I differ with you on is when I look at the rider on the white horse, I personally believe maybe Antichrist, but I believe definitely spirit of Antichrist. I believe it's the white horse is really the beast system. Antichrist may be part of that, but I have a really hard time believing it's Antichrist for a couple of different reasons. One of them is that as soon as the white horse shows up, next thing you know, you got massive war that breaks out, famines breaking out, pestilences everywhere. And ever since you got here, Mr. Antichrist, we've had nothing but hell on earth. So I have a hard time thinking that Antichrist has confirmed the covenant at that point, but I do believe Antichrist could be part of this whole system. I believe it's a representation of the system of the beast. Antichrist is likely a part of it behind the scenes. I think he comes to prominence after the events of the four horsemen. But other than that, I pretty much agree with you on all of these things, and that alone gets both of us in trouble with people.
Well, I've heard you teach that, and I'm not saying you're wrong. I mean, you could be right, but we both agree that the first seal is not necessarily the confirmation of the false covenant.
Yeah, and I think totally, and I look at that, I don't necessarily see why that has to be the confirmation of the covenant, but we did talk about that in the documentary too, I believe. Okay, now we've actually been on for quite a while already, and this has been great. So this person on here, Deborah says, has Bill Salus written books? So yes, Deborah, Bill Salus has written many books, and we aren't making this a book sales program, but yeah, Bill, so you have a lot of books that are out. And I would pull up the slide if I can, but we're having a little bit of problems with that right now. I'll just read them off. So you have the Now Prophecies, 2017, the Next Prophecies, 2018, the Last Prophecies, 2019, the Final Prophecies, 2020, the Millennium Prophecies, 2021. I'm guessing you have a 2023 book coming out too, would be my guess. You also have DVDs, but everybody can get these things on Prophecy Depot, correct?
Yeah, prophecydepot.com. And yes, Paul, I do have a book coming out. I'm about 2 months away called The Future War Prophecies, dealing with all the unfulfilled wars of the Bible, the ones we're talking about here, the ones that go on in the tribulation period with the Antichrist, the war in heaven with Michael, the judgments with the fifth trumpet, with the locust demons, and the war at the end of the millennium when Satan gets loosed. We cover them all in the coming book. That'll be out in just a couple months. Yep. Prophecydepot.com.
Prophecy. Okay, thank you. Because another question came. Can you ask? Can you ask Bill about his website again? So just answer that again. Okay. Still a circle of doom on the website. So I'm not sure what that is about. So I'm looking for questions here. If you have a question, send it in. And please put the question in all caps. Okay, I want to bring up something else because I'm curious about it. It's something you mentioned. You mentioned Israel destroying Amman, Jordan. So the question I have is, it doesn't make sense to me because in Daniel I think it's chapter 11, it appears when Antichrist has come to power, he's moving through the glorious land. It's at that place, the end of Daniel chapter 11. But he doesn't touch Amman, Jordan. What it appears to me in Daniel chapter 11, Jordan is safe from Antichrist, not because they've been destroyed, but because they've resisted, for some reason, they've resisted Antichrist, or he doesn't have power over them. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's two significant prophecies that do talk about Jordan taking a serious hit. One I just read in Jeremiah 49. The other one is in Zephaniah chapter 2, and I'll read it. I've heard the reproach of Moab, central Jordan, and the insults of the people of Ammon, which is northern Jordan. We talked about Amman, Jordan, with which they have reproached my people and made arrogant threats against their borders. It says, the residue of my people shall plunder them. That'd be the Israeli Defense Forces. And the remnant of my people shall possess them. They'll annex territory. I think when I write in my Psalm 83 book, I write this, I'll just do a brief summary of it, but I'll tell you, I've since sort of thought this through, Tom, and I think this is even a better answer for your question. But let's skip this. Okay, I'll just make it real quick. I think what happens is that the Valley of Hamongog becomes central Jordan. I think Israel annexes territory, and it's a perfect place, the valley east of the Dead Sea, to bury a lot of dead Russian corpses and Magog coalition corpses. Edom is a rough area down there. There's a lot of mountain fortress. Amman, Jordan, I think there'll be some Jews who go over there, prominent people, maybe vassals. But I think the real issue is maybe this prophecy of Daniel 11, when he goes in and Edom, Ammon, and Moab escape, maybe that happens in the first part of the tribulation. Israel has annexed territory. They've got a false covenant. They're at peace. The Antichrist is not going to attack them in the first half of the tribulation. He's going to wait till the mid part of the tribulation. That would be why they would perhaps be unscathed when the Antichrist goes on through in the glorious land and goes down into Egypt. I don't know. That's a tough question. It is a tough one, but there are clear prophecies that Jordan gets toppled.
There are, and Bill, I have a lot of questions here for you. What happens during, that was going to be way too long. Caterlin says, what happens during the gap? Yeah, it is long. How long was the documentary we did? An hour and a half?
Yeah, it was 2 days.
So, maybe, I don't think we're going to have enough time for it. Maybe we could do a little bit of that next time I have you on when we talk about the millennium and and the new heaven and the new earth, but there's no way. We can't get through the whole thing. So, Caleb, we will deal with it later, but it's just too long right now. Okay, the battle, this comes from Theodora. The Battle of Armageddon in Revelation sounds a lot like Ezekiel 38, 39 battle. How are they different?
Well, Ezekiel 38 is a specific group of countries, predominantly Muslim, that are spearheaded by Russia, including Turkey, Iran. We mentioned some of the countries earlier, that outer ring of countries. Armageddon is involving all the armies of the Antichrist armies of the world that come together in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, and Jesus comes and defeats that. That's the difference. See, because with Ezekiel 38, God uses supernatural cosmic events, like we talked about, a great earthquake, fire, flooding rains, hailstone, brimstone, and he destroys them on the mountains of Israel. But the other one is led by the Antichrist, not Gog. You have to make Gog the Antichrist, which doesn't make sense. He's not coming out of Russia, the Russian leader. And then Jesus comes at the second coming, and he destroys all the armies of Armageddon with the word of his mouth. So that's a couple of differences.
Yeah. Also, well, thank you very much. Okay, I won't add any more to it. Donna Phoenix says, there's a lot of questions coming in, Bill. How will Israel be dwelling in peace and safety after the rapture? Will it all calm down? Then Antichrist rises and brings false peace. And then when they feel secure, they are attacked by Ezekiel 38. So basically, I think it comes down to, at what point do you think after the rapture, because likely there will be a lot of chaos, rapture takes place, right? So when would Ezekiel 38 take place based on that?
Okay, so my scenario would be that the Israeli Defense Forces takes to task all those people surrounding Israel in Psalm 83, the prophecies I've been reading about with Jordan, and the cup of trembling with Jerusalem. The prerequisite for Ezekiel 38 to happen is Israel has to be dwelling securely, without walls, bars, nor gates, as a peaceful people in a land of unwalled villages. And that's not the case right now. They got walls all around them, walls on the Lebanon border, walls with the Gaza, they even got a wall between Jordan and them. They got a partition wall that's 400 miles running through Israel proper, keeping Palestinian terror away from the central part of Israel. After they win their war, they can take those walls down. We saw how quick the Berlin Wall came down, and they could feel they dwell securely, and they would attract more Aliyah to come over, and more Jews would come in. They're seeing the Jews annex territory. There's more opportunity. And I believe that would be the case also. And Israel finds itself in that condition where they become very prosperous, because Russia's coming after their plunder and their booty. They're not coming to wipe Israel off the map and take the land. They're coming after all of Israel's prosperity. And I think that that's when, after Psalm 83 and these other peripheral prophecies with the Israeli Defense Forces, I think that's when Ezekiel 38 starts to happen. And when that happens, God uses that event to put the world on notice he's the one true God of the Bible. He stops it supernaturally. It's too formidable for the Israeli Defense Forces. We're not involved as a nation, America. He does it. And when he stops it supernaturally, he says, I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. They shall not profane it anymore, and the nation shall know I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. I think that's one of the reasons this happens before the tribulation, because he's given the world an opportunity to know that the God of Abrahamic covenant, the promise keeper of believers, made a major situation. The world will clearly see that was a supernatural event. And then he's going to say, now you can choose me, or you're coming around the corner, you got this other guy who's going to seek your devotion and worship. He's going to kill you if you don't worship him. So I want you to know ahead of time about what's coming. I don't think he's going to wait to do this event after the Antichrist has already implemented his mark of the beast and trying to kill people who don't worship him, and go, oh, I wish I would have done this before the tribulation period. I think he's going to do it before the tribulation period, Ezekiel 38.
Okay. So this also raises another question, and I got more to get here too here. I don't know what we're going to get through in the next little bit of time we have, but with Ezekiel chapter 39, it appears that Israel is surrendering to the Lord. They won't profane my name anymore. So that's not a final fulfillment then, because there are people that place the battle of Ezekiel 39, the fulfillment of it at Armageddon, because of that reason, when all Israel is saved. And that would be when the Lord returns. But you're saying that's not what Ezekiel 39 is referring to. It's this great awakening that takes place and the world recognizes it's the Lord. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't believe it's a salvation knowledge. I believe it's a recognition that, wow, the God of the Jews just came forward supernaturally and defended the Jewish people. Because in the aftermath, the Jews are burning weapons for 7 years. They're burning the dead for 7 months. They're gaining world renown. But they're not necessarily jumping on the Jesus train. I believe at that point they're going to want to build their temple. It probably won't have been built by that time. And it says the nations shall know the Lord. The nations don't come to a knowledge of the Lord. I mean, even after Armageddon, you have people with the mark of the beast, the sheep judgment and Gentile judgment, the goat judgment, Gentiles that happens in the 75-day interval period after the tribulation, before the millennium starts, when Jesus comes back and does the judgment of all the unbelievers. So I don't think we're talking about a salvation knowledge. I don't think when Ezekiel 38 happens, the nations and the Jews start jumping on the Jesus train. Right. I think it's just a recognition.
Excellent clarification. Thank you for that. Bill, I'm getting, okay, there's a lot of questions coming in. So this is what I'll do. I'd like to have you back in a few weeks. We're not done yet today, so I will have Bill back because I have questions on here about the millennium. That's going to be another subject, the millennium and beyond, that we really need to get to. There's people that they're asking about your books and other information that you have. So real quick, listen, just go to Bill's website. Again, we don't use this platform as a book sales department, but listen, go to his website. Bill has tons of material, prophecydepot.com, correct?
Absolutely. And I would say, Tom, that if they want to get what we're talking about here on a book, it's the Now Prophecies or the Psalm 83 prophecy book, or the DVD we have, the Pre-Tribulation Prophecies prophetic documentary. That's got all this stuff on it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, now, so projecting more into 2023, I mean, we're here, January 2nd. Do you see, all this stuff going on with the cashless society? In fact, I'm going to do a short update on this later this week, but the World Economic Forum has their meeting coming, again, January 16th through January 23. So it's only 2 weeks away, their annual meeting. 2,500 globalists will be there. They have 5 different topics they're dealing with and 5 new systems they want to implement. And one of them is they want a new system to deal with high inflation, low growth, and a bad economy. And then we hear the talk about CBDCs, digital currency, and so forth. So when you look at 2023, and these 5 things that the World Economic Forum wants to do, we look at Bible prophecy. Again, not looking, I love your crystal ball analogy. That is great. What was it again? He who lives by the crystal
ball soon starts
eating glass.
He who lives by the crystal ball soon learns to eat shattered glass.
Shattered glass, yeah, that's great. So I'm not asking you, again, we're not doing that. But as we project things forward, you look at this with the World Economic Forum and these 5 things, it's interesting. So with the economy and digital currency, all the things that Elon Musk is doing with Neuralink, wanting to do IDs for everybody, control our travel, vaccination IDs, all these things going on. Where do you see, projecting into 2023, do you see these things coming about?
Well, I think you're going to see definitely the digital currency with the CBDs, I think, is going to continue to elevate and escalate quickly. And you might even see the feds in America come out with a CBD, as a digital currency. China's already implementing it, as are a couple other countries. There's going to be, it's sort of a race like to the moon to who's going to come out with a bigger, better Bitcoin, right? So the central banks can control it. I think you're going to see that. And I think that is the technology that's going to lead to the cashless society, the mark of the beast, no one will buy or sell in Revelation 13. Because what happens when the false prophet and the Antichrist come on the scene to put their program together at the midpoint of the tribulation, they're not going to reinvent the wheel. They're going to take all that stuff from other different countries and put it into their coffer, put their mark on it, 666, whatever their identification is going to be on in the beginning. And they're going to basically just hit the button and it's going to flip on over to them. And they'll control everybody's consumer habits. I think it's going to be more than just buying and selling, though. I think it's going to be tracking and all kinds of different things that could happen. Might even be things that if people take the mark of the beast upon the right hand of their forehead, something happens that makes them unredeemable. Well, what is that? Is that a genetic modification of some sort? Because at that point, they can't be saved. They experience the wrath of God, we're told. So I think it's much more than just digital currencies, but I think we're going to see more countries coming out with digital currencies in 2023.
I just find it all exceptionally fascinating, just as we watch everything developing. The Bible tells us that God tells us the end from the beginning. So, Bill, real quick, final thoughts. We've been on almost an hour. By the way, John Haller's on with me tomorrow. Your friend John, he's on with me tomorrow. We're going to be talking about Chat GBT or whatever it is, and this AI and things that are happening. It's going to be an exciting program tomorrow. But that's tomorrow, 2 o'clock live. But Bill, closing thoughts, and if you're available in a couple of weeks, I'd love to have you back. A lot of people are wanting you back. There's so many questions on here for you. Final thoughts for everybody.
I shared this with you, Tom, before we went on live stream. I've written about all these things where Israel's going to war with these Arab countries. And we know in Genesis 12, chapter 12, verse 3, that God's foreign policy to the Gentile nations is he will bless those who bless Abraham and his descendants, the Jews, but he'll curse those who curse them. And I was praying for a long time, Lord, when are you going to curse those who are cursing the Jews, all those, namely those Arab countries that are in all these prophecies that I've been writing about and reading about and teaching about? And I prayed fervently for several years, and I got this still small voice came to me several years back, and what it was it says, Bill, what part of a long-suffering God that I am don't you understand? And the point is, God is long-suffering. His mercies abound. They're endless. But the time is going to come, and that time may be right at our heels right now. And that's why we're seeing the shift in the new kings of Israel at this point, the right-wing conservatives. The time is going to come where God will execute his vengeance and fury in Iran, and Jeremiah 49 is executed his vengeance and fury on the Palestinians, Edomites, in Ezekiel 25. There's these wars are talking about God getting fiercely angry, executing fury and vengeance. And I understand why he's long-suffering. We see supernatural evangelism going on in Iran. People are coming to the Lord, fastest growing evangelical population in the world, dreams, visions, miracles, healings. We see that's going on, but I think, Tom, the time might be coming in this year where God's fury and vengeance is going to get unleashed through the Israeli Defense Forces and maybe even lead to Ezekiel 38. I don't know if that'll be this year, but I think that will be following on the heels quickly after the Psalm 83 and the other wars.
Yeah. I had Alex Newman on as a guest a few weeks back. In fact, it's the video that YouTube censored me because of. But one of the things he pointed out, he said he's talking with one of his friends. Alex is a journalist, and he said his friend pointed out he believes the 2023 will be the year of the crises of polydoom. And he said he believes there's going to be multiple crises that are going to happen. They're going to be world-shaking events, and not just, not small things, but world-shaking events in 2023. And I asked him, how certain are you of that? He goes, I really believe it's going to happen. I said, 2023 is shaping up. He's not coming from a perspective like me where I'm semi-nuts half the time. And, Alex is brilliant. And to have him say what he said, I was like, wow, very sobering. What you said, also the great reminder that the Lord is long-suffering. His desire is that none should perish. And indeed, we remember, Bill, when we see these things begin to take place, we look up because our redemption draws near. It is the hope in Jesus. Jesus told us these things would take place, folks. He told us these things, what to watch for, so we'd be ready. And we'd also want to share the gospel. Peter reminded us when we think about these things, what manner of conduct ought we to be in holy conduct and godliness. So these things should all inspire us, hastening the coming of the Lord, being excited about his return, but sharing the gospel, because what's coming is very sad and troubling, destructive, and we certainly don't want eternal damnation coming upon anybody, but God even more so desires that none should perish. Bill, thank you very much. So we'll send a note to you here in just a minute as soon as we're wrapped up, and about when you can come back in January.
Perfect. Thanks,
all right.
Tom.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. God bless. See you tomorrow, 2 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, with John Haller. It will be exciting as we look at technology and what is coming right now. Actually, what's already here. See you tomorrow.